who are teaching there generally come from countries, generally they're foreign-born, and they come from countries in which they were middle class or upper class, so that it's very interesting sometimes when we have public panels about minority or race relations to notice that in the panel are included a physician from Nigeria, a sociologist from Cuba, and so on and so forth. So the minority status, as I tell my students, it was something that I only understood in terms of, minority as in great talent and physical beauty. And I actually encourage my students to think of their minority status precisely in those terms: rare intelligence and rare physical beauty. But in 2004, that changed dramatically for me, because I was in a state of a bit of despair, because here I was in Princeton, New Jersey. Try to visualize that, in one of the most expensive real estate places in the whole United States, surrounded by whiteness, surrounded by privilege. I mean, there are 2 jewelry stores on Nassau Street, the main drag in Princeton, and they get as much transit as pawn shops get in Baltimore, Maryland, a place that I actually miss. It's incredible. You can actually get at Hamilton Jewelers a small pendant about this size, really tacky by the way, of a tiger, which is the symbol of Princeton, encrusted with diamonds for a measly $24,000. And when you actually enter that place, it's like they're giving them away. And yet, in 2004, I was actually giving out business cards up and down Nassau Street, mostly to people. I think I was doing a little bit of racial profiling, who happened to be somewhat short and who looked like they were Mexicans and Guatemalans. And why was that? Well, because suddenly the ICE police, that is the Immigration and Custom Enforcement police, was deeming it appropriate to terrify busboys and landscapers and nannies. And they were apprehending these folks, knocking on their houses early in the morning, presenting warrants, dragging away in shackles and handcuffs individuals, and then arresting others as collateral damage, and then placing them in detention centers. Now, I realize that these folks that I'm referring to are lawbreakers. That they have actually broken the laws of the land by crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. For starters, let me just, and you may have questions about this later on, let me say that even now, crossing the U.S.-Mexico border is not a felony. It's not a criminal offense of great import. It is a misdemeanor. Don't believe me? Check it out with your immigration lawyer. But let me agree that these are folks who have actually broken the law. Let's keep that in mind as I continue my remarks. In that context, I want to tell you about the first vignette. This is a woman by the name of Magdalena, who I know as part of my activities as the chair of the Latin American Legal Defense and Education Fund, an organization that was founded in 2004 in order to educate and advocate for the immigrant population in central New Jersey. Magdalena, like other immigrants who call me on the phone, was just anxious because on the one hand, she's been working at this nursing home in Hillsborough, New Jersey, and it's hard work. She told me, I live with death all the time. I don't think that the elderly people who are being warehoused here are being treated very well. And it's sad to be providing these services knowing that they are being neglected. The wages also are very low. Well, that's always been part of the story of immigration. Your ancestors also worked for very low wages and endure harsh conditions and difficult situations. The second part of her story is what most interests me here, and that is she was terrified because the day before her phone call, the ICE police had shown up again banging doors. They have quite a style. What were they after? Well, they were after a Polish immigrant employed there who had no papers. The man ran into the woods, and later on he gave himself up. The children had already been detained, but his wife was there, also Polish, also without papers, and she was in the laundry of the nursing center. So that's where she was arrested while she was washing the clothes of the elderly who are warehoused there. Now, let me ask you, since when did we recognize that we have a Polish immigration problem? I mean, what exactly are Polish immigrants or Ecuadorians or Mexicans, who are the majority, doing here, threatening the security of the country? Hold that question in mind. So for me, most of the last century, the study of immigration to the United States has been an auspicious endeavor, filled with surprises and inspirational lessons. At least it has been for me. I always have thought that immigration is a happy subject to study because it is a subject that comprises the saga of humble workers like our ancestors who arrived in this land searching for opportunity, laboring without respite on behalf of their children. If you interview immigrants, as I do on a regular basis, this is all that they want, a better life for their children. They are very knowledgeable about the extent to which they will endure and have to suffer in the country of destination, but they don't care because they are leaving a legacy of better life for their children. And this gives me an opportunity also to remind you and to tell you, those of you who don't know, that immigrants to this country do not come from the poorest of the poor. As soon as I say that, you can understand why, right? I mean, it takes actually material and psychological resources that most of us don't have in order to endeavor in migration. And so the immigrant population by and large in this country is a self-selected population of people who are not enduring, as the media might tell you, very severe levels of poverty in their own country. What they're experiencing is a huge gap between their ambitions, their desire to progress, and the opportunities that exist in their countries of origin. And that's what propels them into what is really a very, very hazardous adventure. And so almost always foreigners arrive hoping that through sacrifice they will ennoble their progeny and make a real division of America, a country strengthened by the blood and sweat of immigrants. That is the story of immigration throughout the period that this country has existed. In the 19th century, they were recruited from Europe, and they filled the slots in industry. Part of the reason why this country is so great is because immigrant labor accounted for the prosperity of a booming industrialization process throughout the second half of the 19th century and the first part of the 20th century. That was before jobs went abroad. But there is another, less sanguine story related to immigration. When America has failed to provide material and educational incentives to recent arrivals, instead meeting their desire with hostility and their ambition with a lack of sympathy, she has seen their children grow up to become permanent outsiders, resentful, skeptical, and rebellious. The descendants of slaves who flowed from the rural South into Midwestern and Northeastern cities led by hopes of inclusion, only to see those dreams dashed by bigotry and discrimination, so many of their children and grandchildren drop out of schools, join gangs, and give up on mainstream values.